Okay, D'vorah Kost, retired social worker and proactive multidisciplinary therapist and performance artist and musician and so on. Reverend Brooke Rolston here. And D'vorah is seeing this framed 1990, I said 1990, yeah, 1994 drawing, child with quilt in the Warsaw ghetto concentration camp. You had a question, D'vorah.
I was just, I'm just pondering. There's a lot to see here. And my question actually was the configuration of feathers here, because I know often there's wings on your drawings. This doesn't really look like a wing. This kind of looks like a place that has collected feathers and brings in a Native American image to me. It looks almost like a headdress of feathers. That's what I saw.
A headdress, even though it's so separated from where
not a headdress on the
shoulders would be here.
No, not a headdress, an independent headdress.
Oh, I see.
Sitting on the quilt, because this piece here. What is this? What is this piece?
Yeah.
It's whatever you'd like it to be.
Well, what was it to you?
These are like metaphoric wings.
Right.
Just because of, just coming out of like where the shoulders would be metaphorically.
Okay.
That's purely what they are to me. These things are of actually keener interest to me in terms of audience responses, like what people might think they are.
Well, yeah.
Aside from my saying
to me, that's
longer
more,
title.
that seems more clear.
Oh yeah, what have you got?
You say quilt, and it's very suggestive of quilt with possibly child's toys running across the.
Oh, that's a new interpretation. That's totally new.
No one's. Little, dogs dogs.
That's good.
Or four-legged animals,
right?
Be they dogs or goats.
Goats. That's also new. I've always only described them as like doggies or ponies.
Teddy bear and the dreidel.
Yeah.
And, I love your stitching. The stitching is very expressive and appealing to me.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's interesting that it's much finer, perhaps appropriate to a quilt, much finer than the stitching that's over here, which is also remarkable. The stitching that,
Thanks.
That
so I might as well just continue. So this is the 26th drawing of the Sightseeing with Dignity art series. There were, I think, about 4 or 5 drawings done in the last 2 years. This is, if I'm remembering his name correctly, and I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, Ihab Slimane. He was a Frenchman from Paris of Tunisian parentage, was an IT grad, had moved to London, and was living there for 3 months where he was working as a waiter in a French restaurant, and he moved there to improve his English, and he was killed in the, murdered in the London tube and bus bombing attacks of 2006, summer 2006. I just did all that stitching yesterday.
Yesterday?
Really?
Or yesterday and the day before yesterday, yeah.
Huh. I've never watched you stitch something.
Yeah, that's...
It could be a good way to have a good snooze in.
How do you? Oh, so you use, I guess, a large needle and just poke the paper?
Well, using a smaller needle with this, not a really small one, but smaller with this thread's pretty thin, but with the this wax twine here, and with the string, I'm using like a much bigger.
So you're basically
needle.
Just stabbing the paper with your needle.
Well, yeah, just pushing it through, stabbing. I guess I could call it stabbing.
Careful stabbing.
And can you say why you were inclined to stitch this onto its background?
Well, actually, the drawing came up here, and I wasn't keen on how the rest of it looked, including this kind of clump of feathers here. And at one point, I don't know, it might have been a month ago or more, a couple of months ago even, I cut it in. I cut this into this rectangle, I cut that, and I was toying with different ideas of how I wanted to complete it. I ended up moving this section back so the forehead isn't separated like a Frankenstein.
Right.
And that's what I ended up with. And I decided after I got a lift to Dan Smith the other day by an old friend, and lives not far, and I finally got some good archival backboard, which I was waiting for because I didn't have any good paper to mount it onto for the stitching part. Anyway, things sometimes isn't necessarily like a direct response of why something in the creative end, like writing, art, music composing is done. You just do it. Then you have to come up with explanations afterwards, what I call like aesthetic foo-foo. Anyway, but I'd wanted to depict...
There's a non-answer for why the stitching?
A non-answer? Right, yeah. Just because that's how I envisioned it at a certain point recently.
Okay.
Just my homage to this particular victim of those sorts of, to me, completely senseless, and all the debates and stuff I can't stand, a whole nother issue, but with the truck murder in New York, and all the, none of the media, the government, the police, no one calls calls the Las Vegas or Charleston church shootings,
Yes.
And then there's all these, the only people who are addressing it are like guest columnists or regular columnists in the newspapers as to why those aren't called terrorism, but only the ones perpetrated by Muslim extremists are terrorism, and it just drives me nuts.
Yes.
As I've posted incessantly to Facebook friends as well as people who've clicked the Under the Wings page, for example, from my perspective, every mass shooting is terror. So it's a terrorist perpetrated, it's a terror attack, and it's terrorism. But, to me, so like when the New York Times the other night has this headline, October 31st, Halloween, Monday night, about terror attack, in blaring letters, and they'd never used terrorism at all for the Las Vegas thing. To me, it's like a gift to the NRA. It's a gift to Trump and the so-called gun rights lobby. Yeah. But anyway, I'm off on a tangent, and I'll thank you.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And